What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Sully Show. Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time, I appreciate it. If it's your 35th time, well, I appreciate you too. I hope you all enjoy the video we have coming for you today. It is all about pairing whiskeys with food. A lot of people know, you can use wine. Is really popular doing enhanced food. You always hear like red with steak, white with seafood, different wines go best different things, and the flavors of the two really enhance each other. Well, as I don't really like wine and I love whiskey, we're going to talk a little bit about it today from the whiskey side. What to pair with what kinds of whiskeys, how to pair food with whiskeys, so on and so forth along that route. Now, like most of my YouTube channels explaining different things about whiskeys and beers and everything, this is going to be a fairly basics kind of deal. I'm a fairly basic whiskey drink. I'm a fairly basic food eater. I'm not real in tune with the flavors. I'm not a super special chef, anything like that. This is just some real basic, guy sitting at his house, enjoys whiskey, talking about it. So enough talking about it, let's just jump into it. Now, the first thing you have to know when it comes to pairing things are flavor profiles, right? You have to kind of know what is the basic flavors that come with whatever you are pairing. So this is a quick rundown of the basic categories of whiskey and what their typical flavors are. So we have our bourbons. They are typically very oaky and very smoky. We have our ryes, which are a lighter whiskey and normally pretty spicy and bitter. We have our scotches, which are typically smoky, could be peaty. A lot of times I feel like scotches carry a peaty to them, but some scotches are non-peated, in which case they obviously wouldn't have any peat. So I feel it's kind of all or nothing there with scotches. But they carry varying levels of smokiness, some peatiness, and are typically kind of fruity. Have some of those fruity flavors in there. Our Canadian whiskeys, again, they're kind of a lighter whiskey, nothing too complicated, and typically on the sweeter side of the scale. Our Tennessee whiskeys, or American whiskeys in general, anything that is made in America that doesn't fall under that bourbon category, they're normally going to be also a touch to the sweeter side, but with some of those oaky flavors. A lot of them will have that charcoal flavor as well, kind of like Jack Daniels has a charcoal flavor. A lot of those will carry that along. And last but not least, my favorite, the Irish whiskeys, which will typically be some of these sweeter whiskeys out there. They're normally pretty strong with the sweetness, pretty strong with vanilla, honey, some of those sweeter flavors, sweeter aromas. So now that we've gone over basics of kind of what each flavor profile is, we're going to go through that list one more time with kind of what's like the main thing to pair with each one. So when you have bourbons, oaky and smoky with the bourbons, most smoky things are going to go great with a smoky bourbon. It'll kind of help bring out the smokiness in each one. However, ribs are kind of what's known to be like a really good pairing with them. You have a really good smoked rack of ribs. It's kind of top of the line for smoked food, so they kind of pair very well together. Now, the ryes, typically a pecan pie will bring out a lot of good flavors in that rye. A lot of ryes are kind of American. I guess not really all, but I feel like Americans make a decent amount of the most popular ryes. And apple pie is a staple of America. Bourbon and apple pie is also very big, but the list I was reading from is saying apple pie and rye really complement each other very well in the flavors that they bring together, that they contrast each other with, so on and so forth. Now, Scotch typically goes good with absolutely nothing. Alright, Scotch is trash. Don't drink Scotch. But if you do like Scotch, for those of the, I know there's people out there like Scotch, or if they want to sell it, you know. So typically Scotch is going to go good with your steaks. That fat in the steak really help bring out some of the flavors in the Scotch and so on and so forth. Steak and Scotch typically go pretty well together. Now your Canadian whiskeys go good with chocolate. They're kind of, Scotch is also known pretty well to go good with chocolate. Canadian whiskeys go good with chocolate. We'll get into the chocolate in a little bit because it's a little bit deeper than this one sentence that I just gave you. But kind of interesting little tidbit there. Now your Tennessee whiskeys, your American whiskeys that don't fall under the category of a bourbon, they will typically go good with pulled pork. Again, they have that oakiness, they have a touch of that smokiness normally. So kind of anything that goes well with, anything smoked kind of goes well together. Normally pulled pork is smoked. Pulled pork, can't pronounce my R's there. But, you know, Tennessee whiskey kind of a staple with pulled pork. And Irish whiskey, last but not least, goes very well with seafood. And we'll kind of get into why exactly each one of these go together in detail a little bit later as we go down the list of the top 5 things that go with whiskeys. Why that is and how to find other things that you think will pair well with your whiskey of choice. Now, one thing to note, and as I was saying before, every whiskey from each category, and even within those categories, will taste different. Obviously, Jameson tastes like Proper 12. Jack Danielson tastes like Jim Beam, so on and so forth. I guess Jack Daniels and Jim Beam are 2 separate categories there. But you get the point. Not every whiskey is going to taste like other whiskeys and other whiskeys in its category, obviously. So, it's something you kind of got to play with, pairing whiskeys and foods. I would recommend finding a whiskey that you really enjoy, whether it's Jack Daniels, Jameson, Proper 12, Irish whiskey, Angel's Envy, Whistle Pig, whatever it is. Find a whiskey that you like, that you can understand. You know, especially if you're first starting out, I would find a basic whiskey. You can understand the flavors, you know what it tastes like when you're drinking it by itself, and then start adding foods in and seeing what it tastes like with those. So the 5 most popular foods, it's kind of 6, kind of 5. But the 5 most popular foods to pair with whiskeys are cheese, obviously, because who doesn't love cheese? Cheese goes with everything. Cheese goes with more cheese. Cheese goes with even more cheese. Cheese goes with air, whiskey, wine, not water, because water's trash. Cheese goes with everything, though. You get the point. Chocolate, fatty meats, salty seafood, and nuts and dried fruit are kind of the main things that really pair well with those whiskeys. And why each one of them works, well, I'm about to explain that. So starting with our cheese. Now, cheese is obviously a very broad category, almost as broad as whiskeys themselves. But each cheese, again, tastes different. So if you have like a smoky whiskey, like a bourbon, a smoked Gouda, or smoked cheese would probably go very well with that smoked whiskey because that smokiness can play off of each other. It's not a very one side or the other kind of flavor. It's kind of a median, however, still powerful flavor. But if you're going with something like a Irish whiskey, where it's sweet, you get those vanilla, that honey, that sweetness in there, then you would want to go somewhere probably with more of a salty cheese, like, a sharp cheddar. Sharp cheddar is a pretty salty cheese. I don't know a whole lot of cheeses. I'm going to be using some very basic cheeses here. But cheddar's a pretty salty cheese. So you eat that salted cheese, and it brings out a little bit more of that sweetness of the whiskey. Along with the sweetness of the whiskey will bring out a little bit more of that saltiness, some of that flavor that you might have been missing before in the cheese. And on the contrary, if you're drinking a very harsh, very bitter whiskey, you'd want to go with a sweeter cheese. Like, I don't know, maybe provolone, I think is kind of a sweeter cheese. I know brie is amazing. Brie goes good with everything. Brie's a nice soft cheese. Goat cheese is a little bit more of a sweeter cheese. So that's the main way, but I mean right there, a great example. That's the main way to pair whiskey and food. If you're drinking a sweet whiskey, eat a non-sweet food. If you're drinking a spicy or bitter or a non-sweet whiskey, drink a more sweeter food. You kind of want to contrast the flavors, because when you eat something salty, it's going to bring out extra sweetness. When you eat something sweet, it's going to bring out something extra salty. Now you can do the same. You can eat something sweet with a sweet whiskey, but a lot of times you're going to end up just tasting nothing but sweet. Everything's going to go to crap. Your stomach's going to hurt because you just wind up eating too much candy. You know, I'm not talking from experience, alright? So don't worry about that. But as you're going through the list here, you'll notice that's the main key. Now with chocolates, a great example of this is today I've eaten a whole bag of Reese's Pieces, okay? Because I have no self-control. Don't judge me, okay? Don't do it. Okay, so the contrast with the sweetness of that Reese's brought out a typically unknown flavor in the military special, which is some spiciness. I've been noticing a lot more spiciness when drinking that military special due to the sweetness of the Reese's. And that's kind of how the list continues with seafood. Saltiness of the seafood contrasts with sweetness of the sweeter whiskeys. The steak, saltiness of the steak. I mean, steak has sweet and salty in it, I feel like. It's kind of just, I mean, steak is great. Steak is the best thing invented ever. But, well, besides whiskey. I'd say whiskey's probably better than steak, let's be honest. But, so steak, with having that sweetness, having that saltiness, it'll pair well with a lot of whiskeys. And then nut and fruit is quite the opposite, actually. A lot of whiskeys have a nutty hint, a fruity hint. So eating those will kind of help empower the flavor that's already there, which is what we talked about with sometimes you can compare flavors, sometimes you can contrast flavors. Overall, I'd recommend just trying some different things, trying it out, but kind of remember, the more you contrast flavors, the more you will bring flavors out in the whiskeys. The more saltiness you eat, the sweeter your whiskey will taste. And it's kind of a fun way to play with not only whiskey, but play with food and kind of combine them, put them together, and see what you think of them, you know? But that's that for this episode of The Sully Show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this kind of made sense and I didn't just repeat myself too much over and over and over. Because I mean, it's kind of a basic process, however, it's kind of neat understanding how it all works at the same time. If you did enjoy this video, please like, comment, subscribe. Tune in next time, watch some of my other videos in the process. And until Tuesday, I'll see y'all. Cheers.